Good afternoon, Mr. Salazar. Nice to have you.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your service. I also thank the commission staff for the monumental task of bringing this mission change rulemaking to fruition. This rulemaking is taking place in the midst of unfolding climate disasters occurring in the state, in our nation, and internationally. My name is Joe Salazar. I'm a former state representative and the executive director of Colorado Rising, an environmental protection nonprofit organization. I mention my legislative credentials only to the extent that I am aware of the legislative process surrounding Senate Bill 19-181. I also mention my legislative credentials because I will be addressing the testimony of rural county commissioners and representatives of the oil and gas industry involving their attacks on legislative intent. The August 17th, 2020 redraft really goes a long way to addressing some of our concerns, and we thank you for that. Some concerns do remain, however, and I will address them now. First, although setbacks will be addressed in the 600 series, this issue bleeds into the 300 series in such a manner that it deserves being touched upon here. For example, in the redraft rules, setbacks are measured from the working pad surface. That's a really weird starting point for measurement, and I'll tell you why. On May 16, 2019, the director's objective criteria were announced to Colorado. To fulfill the mandate to protect public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources, the criteria unambiguously started the measurement from the edge of the disturbed oil and gas location and not from the well or production facility. Those are quotes. The criteria further explain that measuring from the edge of the disturbed oil and gas location is more protective of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources since it is a greater distance than the buffer or exception zone. As Senate Bill 19-181 and the legislators who came to testify indicate, the COGCC's job is to enact rules that protect public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources. Literally, the redraft 300 series rule goes backwards by making measurements from the working pad surface, which is least protective. Moving away from most protective to least protective is an arbitrary and capricious act. But it's even more than that. On October 17, 2019, CDPHE released its study related to gas health effects. The COGCC then informed operators that permit applications would be reviewed under the criteria for permits under 2,000 feet. The COGCC directly stated that data learned from this new testing will inform COGCC's new regulations and rulemakings and to ensure protective protocols are part of SB 19-181 rulemaking outcomes. Commissioners, I cannot underscore the legally tenuous position the COGCC has placed itself by reducing setback requirements to the least protective requirements. We would encourage the COGCC to reinstate the measurements from the edge of the disturbed oil and gas location in order to meet the public health, safety, welfare, and environment mandate of Senate Bill 19-181. Second, as many of the other groups have mentioned, we too are concerned about greenhouse gases not being included in the current draft rules. Scores of scientific studies extending decades discuss the deleterious effects of greenhouse gases. We encourage the COGCC to include greenhouse gases in the final rules. As noted by others, cumulative impacts have already reached its boiling point. We represent community groups or individuals in Erie, Thornton, Broomfield, and Commerce City against oil and gas permitting. We know the stories of nosebleeds, blood testing, headaches, noise problems, odors, seismic testing, damage to property, dust, use of mass quantities of water, spills, leaks, flaring, etc. Our air quality is already at an abysmally horrible levels, and oil and gas operations contribute even more so to the horrible air quality. We can lay much of the blame on the prior COGCC commissioners who unmitigatingly approved every permit that came their way for over a decade. Colorado is in a statewide drought, and we know that each drilled and fracked well uses millions of gallons of precious water. That's each well. As a note, since public welfare is a statutory consideration, why is the Commission neglecting to take into consideration the financial cumulative impacts caused by this industry? We have oil and gas operators declaring bankruptcy, the effects of which are unknown in our community and state. Financial concerns should also be considered as a cumulative impact, as it is a public welfare issue. Truly, cumulative impact rules should not be interpreted as starting from zero. A cumulative impact rule needs to start from the simple premise that cumulative impacts are already here. And will the Commission approve any more permits that contribute to continued degradation to public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources? That is my segue to discuss what has been said by some rural county commissioners and representatives of the oil and gas industry. The very premise of this rulemaking is to regulate the industry in a manner that protects public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources. Short of these individuals, none of us is here to reduce protection. This rulemaking is so doggone important in establishing the most protective rules in order to protect our state. The industry in some rural counties would have you believe that they know what's good for their respective interests. But we are in a climate mess because pro-industry foxes have been guarding the climate henhouse for far too long. In the past, the COGCC never met a permit it didn't like. Additionally, rural county commissioners are the same people who will complain when the Front Range is taking their water or taking up too many other resources. And guess what? They're right in their criticism. But their decisions on oil and gas are having a disastrous effect on us all. So they should stop their hypocritical and hyperbolic belly aching when people throughout the state are concerned about the pollution and environmental degradation coming from their respective counties. The legislature was quite clear, and the legislators who testified before this committee even made it more plain that public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources, they're the foremost concerns here. No local government can adopt any surface impact regulations that are less protective than state requirements. That is why it's important that you set the most protective floor possible. It is not your problem that some counties have placed all their financial eggs in the oil and gas basket. It is not your responsibility to diversify their workforce or industries. Your responsibility is to protect all of us and our environment first and above all other interests. Commissioners, you are not here to find a happy medium among stakeholders. Setting a protective floor will tell counties like Garfield and Weld that they will not go below the state floor. They could be more protective or stricter than state requirements, but they can't go in the opposite direction. Well, now, as a note, it is an oddity to me that the oil and gas representatives are now crowing for pure local control. On the number of environmental protection bills that I ran as a state legislator, the number of bills I supported, the oil and gas industry took the opposite position, crying about how they didn't need a patchwork of local regulations. Well, now they're salivating over a patchwork of regulations that are the least protective. Simply put, Senate Bill 181 does not support their desires. This industry is not more important to our economy than, say, the tourism industry, which prays for environmental consistency, or our agricultural industry, which needs water to survive. Heck, the oil and gas industry doesn't even crack the top 5 industries of Colorado. So why are we letting them adversely affect the rest of our industry sectors? Oh, let's not accept the argument that they provide energy to the rest of the industry sectors. We are fully capable of now receiving our energy from clean, green sources. In the meantime, we cannot have this industry destroy what's remaining of our climate. Commissioners, protect us and our environment first. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.